back, sewists. It's been a little while. I'm sad I had a little stop in between in the middle of this project, but life happens like that. But we're back to sewing. I have been doing the Nancy Zeman method where I've been doing the 10, 20, 30 minutes to sew. So there will be some clips in this video from the past. So I'm just going to fit them all in here as I edit this together. So we're going to see, we're going to start with seeing some of the handwork that I did, getting this all ready to be put together. So you're going to see those clips now. Okay, so I have got this spread out on my table and I'm going to pin down my sleeves. You can see I've got my edges turned under, and there is definitely a right and a left because of the shaping of the sleeves. You want to make sure you match these up. The edge that's turned under is going to be up here, and then I'm going to put the raw edge against raw edge and just put a few little pins in, and then I'm going to come back and hand stitch these on, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the neckline. Could easily, if you wanted to, put some pins in here. I don't want to, but if you wanted to, you could put pins in here. You could flip this up and you could machine stitch this down. I'm going to hand stitch it because I have a lot of control when hand stitching. The process of whipping it down, I'm going to double check these edges because I want to make sure that they match up beautifully on that seam line. All right, so I'm going to sit and fiddle with this. I'll show you when I get them pinned on, and I'll show you a little bit of handwork too. Just started attaching at the neckline, but I'm not actually going to be stitching it down. I just am doing this for place marking because I want to go ahead and get my applique on the back while it's laying flat. So I need to know where my collar ends in order to get the applique on. But I can't attach the collar until I get my sleeve put together, where I attach the front, the top and bottom of my sleeve. And in order to do that, I have to have my cuffs appliqued on. So this is the order that's not going to be in the instructions because I added the sleeve and I added the applique. So I'm going to go ahead and hand stitch on my sleeves, or my cuffs. But before I even do that, because now that I have the placement for it, I'm going to just stretch this out, which is why I have this on my cutting table, and I'm going to do the placement for my applique so that I can start working on that. Just making sure that center back seam doesn't get stitched over, that it stays open. And of course, when I'm doing my handwork, I can easily keep checking on it. And I'm just going to put a few pins to kind of hold it in place, make sure things aren't flipped around. I'm mostly going to be stitching on this outer edge in brown. And then I will come in and tack in other places in other colors. The cats have scattered them. I see them all over the floor. But I have gone through and picked colors out. And I'm not using embroidery threads, really. I'm just using sewing threads. I do have embroidery thread. The reason I'm not using embroidery thread and I'm using regular sewing thread is because of strength. Embroidery thread does not have strength. So it does have beauty. But I want this to be strong and stay on well. The other thing I could use would be the invisible threads. And I can't find, I have a big spool of it somewhere, and if I start working with my regular sewing threads and I'm not liking the way it looks, I will go pick up probably an invisible thread and use that instead of my regular sewing thread. Okay, I think I have got this placed the way I want. I'm going to just start doing some handwork. All right, I'm just going to do a quick hand basting along the bottom, and then I'm going to hand tack down the top edge, and we'll have one cuff done. And I'm going to try and do it around my tripod. You can see my slippers down here because it's chilly this morning. Before I even do that, I just want to check this and make sure this is going to sew together. Okay. We just want to make sure that that's going to be okay. There's a lot of movement in this bias fabric here, in this brocade. So that's tacked down. Now I've got this ultra dark navy midnight blue thread. That's what we're going to use for actually stitching this outer edge because it will disappear. See how this brocade likes to fray. Making sure I don't have any bubbles. This thread is so dark it's easy, it does disappear, but it's also easy to have a little mistake and not see it till later. I'm not doing too many stitches and I'm kind of keeping them close, especially since I have bias here. Alright, so you can see how slow this is going to go when I'm stitched about this far. This is how it looks on the back. You can see my little picked stitches, just barely. And that's what I'm going to be doing for both cuffs, and then we're going to come back and start working on our applique. Little section, all of this is attached. This is going to take me a while, but it sure is pretty. So I'm in the kitchen stitching. I've been slowly working and I've got most of this brown stitched. I started working on some of the pink. Some of these leaves are still free and some of the red flower is not down yet. And I'm going to just tell you one of my concerns that I'm having. So you can see some of this little, like, it's not totally stitched, but you can just see a little bit of looseness in here. I am sewing on knit. This velvet is a knit. And I am finding that it just gives. And I'm a little worried when I stand this thing up and it holds under its own weight, I'm going to have some buckling and pulling. So I hopefully will not have to be coming back and clipping lots of little threads to rearrange. We will see. We will see. We will see. And as I move it, it changes. I don't know. I do not know. Some areas just lay so smooth. Some areas do not at all. I do not know why. I'm keeping it nice and taut and smooth. It just is what it is, but I am stitching in the kitchen. I'm sitting here in my kitchen because I got tired of being by myself up in the sewing room, so I came downstairs so I could just see other family members and hang out, because this is taking me hours and hours, and it's just more fun to see other people than just be alone in the sewing room when it's a project I can do in the hub of the house. Okay, so after I got all this handwork done and I really fussed with it, I actually ripped it out a few times. I made my husband let me drape it over his shoulders because of the stretch of the fabric. It kept bunching up, and I talked about that in those clips. I was really concerned that I needed to put an interfacing or an interlining behind and kind of marry the two. But then what I found was that the drape changed, and so it was like drapey all around it and then really stable where the applique was, and it changed the way it hung. Didn't like that, so I decided against it. I decided to live with the kind of the bunchiness and then see how it hung. Anyway, I'm happy with how it turned out. It looks worse flat than on the body. It actually hangs out perfectly when the weight of the fabric is engaged. When it's hanging, it looks better. After all of that, I started last night to show how to fold this all together so we can start sewing our seams. And I pulled out the lining because it's lighter weight and a little easier to fold. This is such a large garment. You saw me cutting it on the floor. Well, when we put that center back seam in, it's like a small lap quilt. It's like a quilt and it was so hard to show all of it in frame, to show the folding, to get the seam in. So last night, instead of showing that, I stopped everything and I drafted a half scale pattern because it's just so much easier to show this in half scale. So let's go over now and look at the half scale stuff real quick, and then I'll meet you back here for some sewing. We are going to sew our sleeves together, and in doing that, it's going to put the coat mostly together. So it's an odd shape. Let me just pull this out. And I'm going to try and stay off camera as much as possible. I have on no makeup. It's been a week. So up here we have our dart. And our center back seam is right here. So here's center back seam, dart. This is the back neckline. It comes around to the sleeve, okay? And we're going to just take, the easiest way to do this is to come where the sleeve is, down here. And if you fold the two sleeve pieces together, it automatically helps you see how this all will fold together. I'm going to make a mini of these because I think it'll be the easiest way to do it. Okay, it is many, many hours later, and I drafted a half scale pattern. It's not perfect, but it's close because I think it's going to be a lot easier to demonstrate some things on the half scale. So this is the little sleeve. Here's the collar up here. This is the center back seam. So it's nighttime. It is completely dark outside. So I'm done for the day. I'm going to go ahead and sew up my center back seam. I will see you tomorrow. I'm going to show you how this all folds together, and we're going to start putting it together. Just barely fits. This is the half scale pattern piece, and it just fits on my cutting table. So we've got our sleeves out here. This is the bottom hem, side seams, neckline. So to sew this together, the easiest way to do this is to come to the sleeve, First, we evict the cat. Sorry, sweet Skippy. Nope, we're going bye-bye. So the easiest way when thinking about folding this, I always say it's a little like origami. This is our sleeve, and when I go to do this on my blue one, I have a cuff here, which makes it a lot easier. And here's our neckline. I didn't replicate the dart, but in the large one, there's a dart up here. So we're gonna just take our sleeve, and I have right side up. Here's my seam. We're just gonna fold our seam over like this. And when we do that, up here, this neckline piece is gonna come all the way around like that. And so we're going to fold. This neckline comes all the way down to the hem. And we're gonna pin this together. So if you start at the sleeve and fold, it helps. Let me grab my pins. So I'm gonna fold it one more time. Here's our neckline. This neckline is gonna come all the way to here, and these sleeve pieces are gonna fold on top of each other. So I always do sleeve to sleeve first, because I just think it's easiest to tell what I'm doing, and then I take this neckline piece and it's gonna come all the way to here. And we're gonna put a few pins in it. So I'm gonna put a pin where we do neckline to hem. And I'm gonna come over here and do a pin at the sleeve. And the shapes are a little odd. There's some bias in here. It's gonna be a little wonky. And if you've looked at other people who have made this, sometimes it looks like it pulls a little along that front seam. But now we're ready to just pin this together. And I'm going to, after I pin it, I'm gonna make sure it looks correct before I sew it. Now this is my half scale. I'm showing you this on the half scale, and then I'm gonna go do the exact same thing with my big ones. But the big ones, because they're so large, it's really hard to demonstrate this. They're just so big. The pieces are so large. But I will show you sewing it over at the sewing machine here in just a minute. Okay, so this is pinned together. Now I drafted this little half scale piece. So now I've done one side, I'm gonna come over here and do the other side. I'm gonna pin them both at the same time, and that way I can check that I've done it correctly. So here's my neckline, here's my sleeve. I'm gonna just do sleeve to sleeve, put a pin in that. And I'm gonna take neckline to hem, put a pin in that. And then we have this big curvy C shape that we're going to make everything match up to right in here, which goes from sleeve to neckline. And this is actually down the front of the garment. So I'm gonna go sew these up real quick, and then I'm gonna show you on my little half scale how this looks. And once I've done that, we're gonna go over and we're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna do it in the large ones. Then, once we have got these seams sewn, I'm going to stop and hand sew on the collar piece on the velvet. And because this is half scale, the original pattern had 1/2 inch seams, so this one has just 1/4 inch seams. I wasn't real particular with this, but I tried to get pretty close. I drafted this. I measured the original pattern and drafted out this pattern. So here we are. You can see the little neckline, the drape down, and our 2 little sleeves. All right, let's head over to the sewing machine and sew this up. Okay, we are ready to sew up our little thing here, and I'm not matching threads. This is just strictly for example purposes. I have my thread colors for my beautiful velvets and my linings, so I'm just sewing this up in the dark thread. That's what I sewed my center back seam in. So that's what I'm going to do now for my 2 little short seams on this. And I chose, I don't think I even mentioned, but this is just a scrap of a soft weight, sort of like a pongy lining. It's just a lightweight polyester lining. And that I had a bunch of, just came out of my scrap pile. I love using up my scraps for things like this. and it's going to be great. So I'm not going to finish this off. It's not going to be anything perfect. Sometimes I kind of want to do that in half scale. It's really fun. I messed up a pin here. It's really fun to make half scale garments and do some, like a really beautiful garment in half scale. I think it's like doll clothes a little bit. Fun. Okay, let's get this sewn. I do have my my machine set for straight stitch. I'm doing this in a half. Oh, my top thread's not threaded. I have my even feed foot engaged, and I'm wondering if I'm going to need to change my needle again. All right, we are now ready to sew. This is really so that you can see how it goes together in a little bit easier, in an easier way to look at it. It's because it's just smaller. Okay, there is one little sleeve done. Now let's do the other, making sure I'm recording, I am. Let's do this other little sleeve. And when you do this, I'm noticing on my sample, and I'm sure it will be the same in the other, one side is looser than the other. One side has more give to it, one side has more bias to it. The side that has more give, put on the bottom, let the feed dogs handle it. The side that's a little tighter, put on top, and that will just make it easier for you to let the machine do the easing work for you. Okay, I'm going to give this a quick press, and I'll meet you back over there and we'll look at it on our little dress form. Let me hold it up, actually, even before that. Now, I'm going to hold this up like this, and you can see how it hangs funny. Look at how funny it hangs. See the back? But it actually, those seams roll to the front. So it's actually going to roll more like that. Okay, let me press it. I'll see you over there. Okay, so here is the little jacket on. It really needs a sleeve to show off how this fits, but you can see how the seam comes down the front here. This is the seam. Here's the other side. So without an arm in that sleeve, it's a little hard to see the fit. So here it is with I've got a little arm on one side. I may have to make my little dot here another sleeve, and you can see here's the little curve, so this is where we'll button. I'm going to turn it to the back, and you can sort of see the drapiness of the back. Now, I didn't put the dart in the back, but you can still see how this hangs. And of course, I don't have legs. Like if there was a body in here, that would help this hang more properly, but you can still see how the shape is and the hang, and that interesting, it gives you that neat V look, which I think is part of the whole cocoon. But that's it as far as sewing it together. You have this one seam that goes across the front, and that's pretty much the coat. After you sew that in the lining and the outer, we'll do some little handwork on our collar, and then we can start attaching our lining to our outer coat, and then we have the chain and the shoulder pad to put in, and that's pretty much the garment. So it takes longer than that because there's a lot of handwork, but now you can kind of see how this goes together, and that's it. Okay, so now we're going to go do the same thing. I'm going to go pin both of my pieces, my velvet and my lining, and I'll meet you over at the sewing machine and we'll put them together. All right, we are going to have my lining ready there. Here's my outer coat. You can see the applique right there, and the cuff. If you remember, I added a cuff to it, so that's folded to the inside. We're just going to get this very few seams in this. The one bad thing in the camera is, and I do this a lot, I sew on like black and dark navy, and it's hard to see in the camera exactly what I'm doing. 1/2 inch seam allowance. I put lots of pins in this velvet because even though the velvet kind of sticks to each other like a Velcro, it also tends to creep. So just to make sure that it stays where it belongs, there's a lot of pins. And I did use the notches, and it's a good idea. This is a weird, it's not a super long seam, but it's curvy and it has a lot of bias in it. And that just helps keep everything where it belongs. All right, there's one side. We're going to flip it around and do the other, and then we'll come back and do the lining. Just going to check my seam here. The thing I'm most concerned about is I want to make sure that cuff lines up nice and neat. I put a pin right there on that seam, and I'm going to flip this around so you can see, because this seam, my naps are going in opposite directions where this seam matches up. This is one of those things that I was really worried about. Boy, that looks luxurious though. That fabric is so beautiful. Wowza. Wowza, wowza. I'll meet you back here after I get all the rest of this lining and coat done, and we'll decide what to do next. Okay, so I have those seams, the few seams there are sewn. I'm going to go ahead and press these open, and then we're going to head back over to the cutting table and pin on the collar to the velvet portion, and then I'm going to be doing handwork for a while. The other thing I'm thinking about is this does have a shoulder pad in it, and there's no, normally I stitch my shoulder pad to the seam in the shoulder, but there is no shoulder seam in this. So to get the shoulder pad in there and get it to stay, there's no way to stitch it to the outside part of the garment where you wouldn't see the stitches. So I think I'm actually going to stitch it to the lining. So instead of stitching the upper part of the shoulder pad to the outer garment, I'm going to stitch the under part of the shoulder pad to the lining. That's how I think I'm going to handle that. But to do that, I'm going to try the lining on, get the lining in exactly the right place, place my shoulder pads, pin them in, and then do the stitching. Once the chain's in and I finish off the lining, the garment is done other than buttonhole and loop, which I have not thought about that loop at all. I need to put some thinking into the loop. Okay, so all that said, let's head over and pin on our pretty collar. So here's my bias cut collar, and I have pressed up the outer edge where I will be stitching it down. It's going to go across those darts. Here are my darts. So I'm lining up the center back seam of my collar on the center back seam of my coat, and I'm just going to start pinning it down and arranging it as I go. And there you can see my applique. And when I picked this up, I realized I have one little section of applique that's not quite stitched down right in here. So I need to finish doing that too. Isn't it pretty though? Okay, so I've hung the lining on the larger of the dress forms because it just fills out the shape a little better. I've got to make some arms for my dress forms. That is one of the things that I have still not done, and I am regretting it. So I'm moving this around. You can see the darts. The darts fold to the back this way when we're putting them in. One of the things I'm noticing, I did try on the coat a little while ago just to look at it, and it just drapes so beautifully, and this is so stiff. So two things can happen. It may just give a little bit of stability to the coat and make the coat drape better, or it may make it hang in a way that I don't like. If that's the case, I'm going to make a new lining. We will see. So I'm just going to leave the lining on for now, just leave it here out of the way. I want to talk to you about this seam right through here. I have noticed when looking at other people who have made this, when the garment is on, it pulls right through here. It often looks tight. And the reason is it's like a sleeve or anything like that where you might need to come in and do some clipping along here to release this seam. And I'm thinking I might need to on the lining. On the velvet, I don't. The velvet is knit. It gives beautifully and it does not pull at all because I chose a knit. Now let's look at my collar. So here's my applique, and I've got half of the collar pinned on, and you can see I have this edge tucked under. So here it is all the way down, including to my little point. This is all ready for me to sit. I'm just going to hand stitch it on like I did the cuffs. I'm going to go ahead and pin on the other side, and then I'm going to double check. I've got a couple pieces down here that are not quite stitched all the way on the applique, so I've got to finish that. So I think I'm going to stop here. Next week we will put in the lining, we will put in the chain, we will put in the shoulder pad, and do any finishing things we need to do. I know I'm going to understitch that lining to make it lay nice so that it doesn't peek out. I'm probably going to do some other little tacking in places just to make sure that the lining behaves itself. So I will see you next week where we finally get this thing put together and finished. This is the coat that never ends. See you next week for another fun video.